Are we ready?
We're ready, Madam Chair.
Okay, if we can get everybody's attention, I'd like to call to order the Cuyahoga County Council Committee of the Whole for Thursday, July 17, 2014. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Calling the roll, Ms. Conwell? Here. Mr. Jones? Here. Mr. Hairston? Here. Ms. Simon? Here. Mr. Greenspan? Here. Mr. Miller? Here. Mr. Brady? Mr. Germana? Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Schron?
Here.
And Ms. Conley?
Here.
There is a quorum.
Although we ordinarily do not have a moment of silence at the Committee of the Whole, I would like to take a moment this afternoon for a moment of silence for Mrs. May Germana, Chuck Germana's mother, who was a model citizen, who had lived the American dream in many ways, and when she came to this country, and she will certainly be lost by a great loss to her family and to the community. All right, on behalf of council and all its members, we'd like to extend our deepest sympathy to Chuck.
Thank you.
All right, any public comment related to the agenda? We see we got lots of folks here today.
Yes. Thank you.
It's Charter Amendment Day.
Okay.
Okay, Mrs. Schmutz will be calling
Yes.
you out as you signed in.
We have Nora McNamara, who wishes to address the first item, which is the Halley Building.
No, just this.
Thank you for your attention. I just want to speak very briefly to a particular aspect of the Halley Building, and that is the county archives and the move of the county archives over to that location. I wanted to put forward to you that I think it's particularly important that we have a proper oversight of the archives. This is something that requires specific education and expertise, and so I would like to recommend to the council that they create an oversight committee immediately that can help provide advice and guidance to the Public Works Department and their warehouse manager in the setting up and operation of the archives. This committee, I would hope, would be a permanent installment and would be able to provide ongoing assistance so that we can have a facility that has been as accessible as required by law, but also to the many institutions and the many users of the county archives. So I would ask that you would, at the very least, ensure that a certified archivist is involved in this right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Helen Smith?
On the same topic as Nora just spoke, I second everything that she said, and also remind the county that this has been sort of a weird way of handling a major asset that belongs to the county. We're going to lose the archives from the Ohio City neighborhood, where they've been accessible to the countywide population, easy to park, easy to access, able to get in there, utilize the facility. We hope that's going to be repeated at the new facility, and in order to guarantee that, and also the safety of the archives, I mean, the folks over there are not hoarders. What they are doing is according to state and federal codes. The movement should be done according to those codes. We really support the idea of this advisory committee that would go into place as quickly as possible. We understand Councilman Conley will introduce an ordinance to that effect, and that we already have people lined up that would be happy to serve in that capacity that you all would appoint. So we encourage you to do that, and thank you for your consideration.
And thank you, Ms. Smith.
Mary Rose Oker?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and distinguished members of this separate but equal branch of government, the County Council. I want to, of course, speak on behalf of preserving the archives. There's such valuable documents. Do you know And I know the chair, who is a historian in her own right, knows all of this, but do you know that we even have documents from the Underground Railroad that went through St. John's Episcopal Church on Church Avenue there? I found out my home on West 30th was built in 1890. My parents always thought it was built in 2010. We also found out the names of the streets of Ohio City and elsewhere. It's not just about Ohio City. But it was appropriate, even though it could have been done in a more efficient way, but it was appropriate to have those archives in a historical neighborhood. On the other hand, I have always been concerned, since the county didn't have somebody there all night, somebody in law enforcement, that something would happen to those archives, and that's been a kind of recent development, maybe a couple years ago. They did that. So on one hand, I'm glad if you put them in a place where they'll be safe. On the other hand, I'm sorry they're leaving Ohio City, but I hope you have an advisory board to oversee them. And some of you would probably be good ex officio members of that, you know? So I just want to second and third the motion that the other two fine representatives just mentioned. And thank you for hearing us. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Martin Hauserman.
My name is Martin Hauserman. I'm Chief City Archivist, Clinton City Council. Why government archives are necessary? Governmental archives allow us to remember who we were and are, to remember the processes and procedures undergone to get where we are today. The proper care of and access to its documents allow an institution to protect itself legally and give all its constituents a valuable community and cultural asset, the ability to research its past and the present and ready itself for the future. I just want to say that among the things that an archives might have would be blueprints. These are the blueprints of the Halley Annex done in 1939 when the McBride building was renovated. They should be taken care of and taken care of properly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hauserman.
Those are all the individuals who wanted to speak regarding the Halley Building archives, and Mr. Bruce Akers would like to make just some general comments on the charter amendments at this time.
Do you know, Mr. Akers, do you want us to, why don't we finish the archives business and maybe or do you have to leave?
Chairman Greenspan has, I guess, a plan for how he's going to deal with each individual item, and then he'll have an opportunity to come up and speak again
Yeah, okay,
for
I think
those.
be closer to the time that we're going to hear the information, so, okay. All right, then we're going to move on to item 4 then.
Reading into the record, resolution number 2013-0170, a resolution making an award on requisition number 24534 to Halley Industrial Park in the amount of $10,069,265.64 for lease of space for the period anticipated to be June 1, 2014 through June 30, 2024, authorizing the county executive to take all necessary actions and to execute all documents necessary to consummate the contemplated transactions, and authorizing the Director of Public Works to administer the project, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
All right, so this matter is here before the Committee of the Whole, and it's an opportunity to have one more hearing on the matter. If everyone is satisfied this afternoon, then the ultimate result would be to vote it out of committee and put it on for third reading on August 3rd? I'm sorry. Third reading on August 3rd, am I correct? August 12th. August 12th, okay.
I apologize, Madam Chair. Actually, this item would be
On for second reading.
on for third reading adoption on July 22nd.
No, I think
It's
we're on for
already-
August 12th. It's on for August 12th. Yeah. I thought we'd give more people additional time to consider it.
Oh, okay. Right.
Okay, let's finish with it. Let's hear all the comments and we can make a decision whether we want to go for the next meeting or August 12th. Okay. All right, Bonnie.
Thank you. Bonnie Teowen, Director of Public Works. I believe the last time we spoke about this was October 22nd, where we had a detailed description of the condition of the building and how we got to the decision of the Halley Warehouse. We had URS do a detailed presentation on our selection process and all the things that went into evaluating the property. At that point, there was discussion about our process center manager, and I let you know that we were in the process of hiring that process center manager. Lo and behold, he's now a county employee. I'd like to introduce him to you, and he's had an opportunity in the 2 weeks, Jim, that you've been here. 2 weeks, 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks that he's been here, he's had an opportunity to review our records, review our facilities, spend some time in the archives, and actually spend some time looking at the proposal and other properties that were available at the time. So I'd like to hand it over to Jim Fisher. He's our process center manager, and he can go over what he's learned in the last 3 weeks and his experience in record management. Jim?
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Jim Fisher, and on June 30th of this year, I had the opportunity to become an employee of Cuyahoga County. I also had an opportunity to meet before a subcommittee, discuss the properties that are in question. One of the things that before I start, I want to forth what the other three individuals prior to me did, spoke for Nora, Mary Rose Okar, Helen Smith, and I believe Martin, as far as supporting that as far as a separate advisory committee for this process, specifically for the archives. I had an opportunity to review all the properties that were in question. There were 7 properties originally that submitted bids, and there were 5 that were, for whatever reason, were ruled out, and there was 2 that were pending. One was the Halley Building, and the other one was the Shoreway Commerce Park, which is no longer available. That's been leased. So the only one in question right now is the Halley Warehouse that we are talking about. In the early 90s, Dr. Judy Santina, who is the acting archivist for...
No, she is the archivist.
Sorry. Archivist for Cuyahoga County, did propose a site in the same jurisdiction, same area, shadow away from the Halley Building to house the, excuse me, the archive building. It was approximately about 40,000 square feet. It was on or about Payne Avenue and East 40th Street. So we are basically looking in the same location as the original proposal from Dr. Santina. So in the meeting that we had with Councilman Gallagher, Councilman Conley, Joe Nanny, Sean from Board of Elections, and Trevor, a couple of questions came up as far as concerns, as far as the Halley Warehouse and some other properties. And I wanted to try to address those questions for you. First of all, not all brokers, when this is paid public posting of the building, applied for, submitted bids for the properties. So we had 7 proposals. One of the questions was a new construction, and there was a question as far as costs go. Can you? What's that? Okay, there's a question as far as the new construction cost. An estimated cost to construct or relocate to a new facility was $34,900,000. And this does not include the land acquisition, environmental abatements, and so forth. So total cost over the 10 years would be $46 million, and for 20 years, it would be $59 million. The Haley Warehouse estimates for renovation and occupancy for 10 years would be $16,800,000, and for 20 years, $33,100,000. There's a question for, as far as a 100-year-old building. I'm not sure if the building is actually 100 years old, but my response was that the property is still standing and probably will stand for another 100 years. I'm not sure if construction now of buildings will last 100 years, but I'm confident that this property, with the renovations, will still be here after we're gone. Another question was as far as malls. There was a question as far as why didn't we take a look at malls. There were 3 malls that I had reviewed. None of the companies or realtors or brokers submitted a bid, and quite possibly those malls are being used for something else and not for storage, as far as we're not aware at that time. The reason for we were having landlord upgrades for this property. This is close to public transportation. It's within the central business district. It's close to public transportation and highways, and it was still a viable property to be considered for approval. The other process that I went through, I asked to review any new properties, which I've only have the opportunity to do. I can't do anything else than that, and I can't mention any of those properties based on the present situation. So I reviewed some additional properties, and some of the properties were the original bids, and some were new properties, but they were not within, they didn't have 200,000 contiguous feet for us to provide the services that we wanted. This is a property that I'm still recommending for consideration. I feel that once the renovations are done, we're going to have security. There will be ADA for disability individuals to access the property, which the Franklin Avenue property at this time does not have. And we will be combining a number of agencies within this department, this building, that will be a one-stop shop. We will be able to utilize staff multiple ways. We will not have to bring staff over. So if something needs to be done, it can be resolved within this building and not have to be pulled from other areas of Cuyahoga County.
I think so based on your experience and your research thus far, you are satisfied with this as it suits the purposes for which we ask?
Yes. It's still the one I'm recommending for consideration.
All right, does anyone on the committee have any questions? Mr. Greenspan?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I didn't see on the analysis of the Haley building on the schedule what the costs are to upgrade the building. What are those costs? Whomever.
If I may, sorry, just because I'm a little bit more familiar with some of those details. That's a more scalable project in terms of what the cost would be, whereas new construction is more of a fixed, but if memory serves me correctly, the total cost that we were contemplating to renovate Haley would have been just shy of $10 million. And we can confirm that for you. We do have that number. URS fully developed that budget, but that would have been the the number, and then some of that would have had some offset by what the landlord was providing as an allowance.
And I notice in the analysis, it's up on the screen, the cost to construct and relocate, but I didn't see in the Haley analysis what the cost of relocation is going to be. What is the cost of relocation?
So we did factor in a cost of relocation for the Halley warehouse. We factored in roughly half of what the cost would be, because half of the end use of that building is already in place, and you only have to do minor shifts for the renovations there rather than a full move. So whatever the relocation was for new construction, we used half that number as our estimate for the Halley building.
And so you're saying that number's in the 16.8 for the first 10-year cost?
Yes, that's all baked in.
Okay. You know, I wasn't part of any previous discussion since or any discussions from our last meeting till now, and I was an advocate of the new construction model. But the new construction model, not as a standalone archive facility, but a standalone model in consolidating the Board of Elections from 2 facilities into 1. And I don't see an analysis done. The discussion revolved, I don't see it done here, the discussion revolved around building a new archive facility, state-of-the-art facility, consolidating both the warehouse operations for the Board of Elections and their operations that take place over on Euclid, the cost of selling the Euclid, or the benefit of selling the Euclid facility, and those proceeds being used to build a new facility or new campus itself. What was there any work done based on those types of discussion or that model?
I'll tell you that we did not do anything in that specific, to evaluate that specific scenario, because our understanding was that following the report that Allegro had done for the county in 2011 and 12, that their recommendation was to keep that Euclid Avenue building. Bonnie might know more detail on that, but that was my understanding at the time.
Their recommendation was to get rid of the Haley building also on that same report. So
I think
No.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I think if I recall correctly, that their recommendation was to divest of having a facility where only the Board of Elections was, and to roll it into the final facility. You know, not in your report, but, you know, in speaking with the folks from Allegro, I think in their minds, it was a potential option always that Halley could be a home for it if they chose to propose. That was always something they thought might end up. So I don't think they intended to say the Halley building was off the table, but more so that just having 100,000 feet of BOE there was not something that would be a good solution. I think that was really more of the intent of that.
yeah, because I'm curious, I know there's been some discussion about the old juvenile justice facility on East 22nd and tearing down, you know, the jail component in the back, building the archives, moving the entire Board of Elections operations, as well as the print shop and some of the other facilities into that location with some renovation. Since we already owned it, own that facility, there'd be no acquisition costs, assuming the soil, there's no remediation. I don't know what that might look like, but clearly take the proceeds from the sale of the Euclid facility of the Board of Elections, not entering into this $10 million, what that model would look like. There's plenty of parking. There's also plenty of room to add decked parking if that was an option. Was that ever considered?
Actually, it was considered. We looked at the Juvenile Justice Center, and we considered it after you brought it up, and we appreciate that. The configuration of the old Juvenile Justice Center is a very broken up floor plan. The loading capacities is not appropriate for heavy storage that we have for records. The remediation that would need to take place, because there are some abatement issues that have to be addressed if you're tearing anything down, that becomes an additional cost to it. So we didn't believe that it was cost effective, and it would, to reutilize that building, you would almost have to tear down everything and rebuild new, and you're back to this, you know, all new facility cost is where you're
So
at.
what you're saying is the building isn't worth salvaging for this purpose?
For this purpose, correct.
All right. I just want to make sure it was considered. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Yvonne?
Through the chair to, I guess, Bonnie, if we did go with the new construction option, what happens with the documents in the meantime?
They would remain where they are.
But I thought that deal was only
We have,
How long would it take, I guess,
We have,
for a
2
new
years.
construction?
from
Geist
December.
Brothers.
Yeah, we have 2 years, 2 years from December.
So we have about a year and a half left.
Yes, yeah,
A year and a half left?
that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So if I may, during this whole process, we've, URS has been involved as far as coming up with the program for what the Halley Warehouse would look like, and has spent some time with the Board of Elections, and just to help them understand the process for the Board of Elections and how that would all basically lay out in the plans. And if we may, we'd like to have Pat McDonald come up from the Board of Elections and let him speak about the design that.
Madam Chairperson,
Yes, Mr. Brady.
I don't mean to be impatient, but we have a lot of work to do, and for almost all of us, we've been having this discussion for 2 years. Some of it's been controversial, and I know that people have, been to the site. A lot of concerns were dealt with by people on the council who were, who were not convinced that this was the right decision. But quite honestly, unless somebody has a specific amendment to make or wants to do something, I think 2 years is long enough to discuss this property issue, and I would hope that if we don't have anything new to add here, that we I would be asking to call the roll on this issue, unless someone has something new, and of course a new member would, because they haven't been here for 2 years to ask these questions. So I respect that, but so that's where I'm coming from.
I somewhat agree with Mr. Brady, although I don't think that you can ever spend too much time, about our history. And, I read a lot of history books, and you go back and you look at the footnotes and, the kind of documents you have to go back to. And that's why I'm, very concerned about maintaining the history of this county. We don't want things like, those blueprints lost. But I agree with Mr. Brady. Is there some specific question that you wanted to ask of the Board of Elections people? Yeah, go ahead.
Madam Chair, the chairman and myself were the two that were most concerned about this. We challenged you to hire somebody that's going to make this decision. You did that. He made the decision. We've heard from the board about their desires to stay there. So I don't know what else needs to be done. So following the chair's recommendation, I think we need to move forward.
Yeah, and I Jill, will add that I'm working with staff to prepare legislation to have an advisory committee created. We were kind of hung up a little bit on the qualifications. We didn't want to make the qualifications too tight that we couldn't find people, but then we wanted to make it sure that we would have qualifications for the committee that the people would have sufficient interest and background in the field. So I'll be introducing that in the next, probably at the next meeting or so. If there's no other questions for the Board of Elections, the issue today would be to vote this out of committee, and we will be set for a third reading for August 2nd? 12th, sorry, I can't get these numbers together. We've on for third reading for August 12th.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that be voted out of the committee for going for a third reading for August 12th. Any discussion on that? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the ayes have it, and it will be on for third reading on August the 12th. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We have nothing else. I'm switching chairs here again. And you see I'm moving to the right, which is hard for me.
You feel so good.
We're glad to have you. We're very glad to have you. He's moving left, though, that's normal.
No, he's moving to the center. No,
The Greenspan are moving to the center.
he's moving to the center. That's a real challenge. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Greenspan hasn't been this far left in his lifetime, I think.
No, he's
Moving to the center. Okay, great. Well, thank you. Oh.
I was out in your neighborhood yesterday. Good parade. That was cold. Huh? Low turnout because of the cold. Oh, was it? That was cold?
I'm okay. All right, very good. We'll go ahead and start this portion of the meeting. One of the things, and just so I can go over some of the variances or some of the ways we're going to run this part of the meeting, we will offer public comment for those members of the public who came to speak for items related to the agenda. They will each have 3 minutes to speak at the beginning of the meeting. But what I'm going to do also is, as each of the 8 items is read, prior to council discussion, we will allow 90 seconds of public comment for each item. We'll keep track of it. We usually will run it up on the clock, and there'll be a buzzer. The buzzer doesn't work at 90 seconds there, so the clerk has a bell. If the clerk will, if you hear that, please finish your sentence, not your thought. Please finish your sentence. As Councilman Brady said, we have a lot of items on the agenda. One of the things I want to bring forward, and for my colleagues, and we've been operating for the last 3.5 years in a very respectful manner towards one another, being mindful of our difference in temperaments, talents, and convictions. Today, I want to make sure that we continue to operate in that respectful manner, not only to each other, but to the public. With that said, some other interesting items relating to how these proceedings will transpire is it will require 6 votes of this body to move the item to the next, to the referral to the council, but it will require 8 votes of council to send it to the ballot. So I just wanted to bring that up. And these items today will be heard in the order in which they were presented before council, not necessarily in the order in which they appear on the agenda. So the first item that we will hear today, which was the first item that we discussed in our first committee of the whole, is Resolution 2014-0165. And if the clerk would just please read that item. I did. You're right, actually, to your point. If Madam Clerk, public comment related to the agenda.
There is public comment by Mr. Bruce Akers.
Mr. Chairman and Madam President and members of council, I just wanted to express on behalf of my fellow colleagues of the Charter Review Commission our appreciation for the fact that you are bringing up additional amendments that we proposed in our original plan. We, of course, expressed our disappointment that only 4 of our 15 got on the ballot last year. We were pleased that they all passed well. But we wanted to express our appreciation that you are taking up additional amendments to be considered and hopefully passed on to the voters. Just by way of information, knowing that you're doing this, we had a meeting of the Charter Review Commission last week to look over what you are proposing. 2 of our members are out of town, but 7 of the 9 we did meet. And as the individual items come up, as the chairman just said, some of us may have some individual comments. But I did want you to know how much we appreciate your bringing this back up. Thank you.
The rest of the persons who signed in to speak would like to address the individual items when they come up, and also Mr. Will Tarter is here to answer any questions related to the amendments that council may have.
Thank you. The first item that we'll hear will be Resolution 2014-0165. If the clerk would please read that item.
Resolution number 2014-0165, a resolution providing for the submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga an amendment to Article 6, Sections 6.01 and 6.02, and Article 11, Section 11.01 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, changing the composition of various county boards and commissions to ensure independence of judgment of all members, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Very good, thank you. And the way we'll continue to proceed through this is the author or the primary sponsor of the legislation will give a presentation, a final presentation. All these have been heard in previous committee of the wholes. The only difference would be any proposed substitutes. And we have on this one, on 0165, which I was the sponsor, a proposed substitute amendment. For the purpose of discussion, we'll need a motion to accept the substitute, and then a second. We'll vote on the substitute and then begin discussion. Is there?
Mr. Chair, is the amendments already included?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. And this item is on page 41 in our agenda, and the proposed substitute is on page 46. So since I made the original proposed resolution, I'll go ahead and make a motion to
Second.
substitute Very good. Motion's been made and second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of substituting the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the substitute is before us. Madam President, you actually, this is your amendment. This is the charter amendment to change the composition of the boards and commissions to remove any potential conflict of interest or conflicts that might arise from an employee reporting, sharing a position on a board with their employer, or for other matters to ensure independence.
I'm pulling a blank here.
Okay. I can address your comment. The Madam President's amendment has to do under the Audit Committee. And under the Audit Committee, the current structure of the Audit Committee shall consist of the fiscal officer, which shall be the chair, the county executive, the president of council, and 2 residents of the county. The proposal is to change the composition of the Audit Committee to be the president of council, a member of president of council, a member of council appointed by the president, and 3 residents of the county. The belief here is that an audit committee should not have on its committee itself members to whom the audit committee reviews or hears policy relating to. Does that summarize?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm back in focus now. Many of the reviews of the audit committee are of fiscal policies for the county, and the fiscal officer is the chair of the audit committee. And as I've learned a great deal about internal audit since I've been on this council, and actually from Mr. Greenspan and particularly from Ms. Harry, that, you know, the internal auditor is a person who goes in and checks out your procedures. Are you doing things right? And so it's almost like the inspector general. It's an independent voice that comes in and looks. And I think this would be certainly a check and balance. And I'm also, as I have to throw in my plug for the internal auditor, I also, would greatly like to see this program expanded so that we could provide internal audit for various cities and municipalities around the county who can't afford to have a regular internal audit, staff, but they could go in and they would pay the county, so it would actually be somewhat revenue producing. These people would pay for their own staff. But no, I sincerely stand behind this this amendment to the charter, and I think it would make our government more transparent and have an additional checks and balances.
Okay. Any further discussion? No. Hearing none. The motion's been made and seconded. We've had discussion. It takes 6 members of council to move this item from the committee. Mr. Miller?
I just want to be clear that the motion that we're voting upon is the version in which we're only dealing with the audit commission and not the other 2. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair? Just a question. When we're looking at members, the electors of the county to serve on this board, there's no qualifications. Maybe they're here, but are there going to be any standards that we're going to have in a set forth to make sure that they're qualified to serve on this kind of committee?
It's kind of the issue that we were dealing with, we talked about the archives. For instance, some commissions, you have to be a veteran, or you have to, and so we don't want to make the qualifications too tight that it limits, like someone might have a lot of experience, but they don't have that exact, qualifications the way you state it in the ordinance. So the council would have an opportunity to review the appointments to make sure that the person is qualified. So I'm more inclined to leave it a little bit vague because it gives us a little more leeway in terms of a person to select.
Very good. Mr. Schron?
Yeah, and I reflect and agree with at least the concerns of my council colleague Simon, and agree with leaving them flexible to the degree But I would certainly like to make sure that when we post that, for that, that it does bring in accounting experience, background, having probably served on a public or private audit committee, so that we bring that expertise in play. I would like to make sure it's not just somebody that walks in and anybody off the streets that would be sitting on this, because this is an extremely responsible position. I agree that having citizens outside are the best ideas, because all the other audit committees that I'm aware of actually use a third party outside of the venue to make sure they're doing the checks and balances. So I'm in agreement with the idea, and I share your concerns to make sure we have qualified people to sit for that.
And Mr. Miller suggests that we actually could pass an ordinance regarding the qualifications. It wouldn't be in the charter, so it would give us a little bit of leeway. But yeah, I think the screening committee should be very diligent in making sure that the person, has the sufficient background.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion? Once again, it'll take 6 votes to move it out of this committee, no final and then 8 votes to place it on the ballot. These will be placed on our next council meeting on the 22nd for second reading, and then third reading will be the first meeting in August. Should we need additional time to deliberate, the submission to the Board of Elections is not till September 5th, so we do have another meeting in August should we decide either after today, or should we decide after today that more time is needed. Madam President?
So I'd like to make a motion to vote it out of committee.
Very good. There's been a motion to move.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of moving this item to the July 22nd council meeting for second reading, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, this item has been advanced.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Miller.
I'd like my name added, please.
Madam Clerk, please add Mr. Miller as a co-sponsor. The next item on the agenda will be Resolution 2014, was 2014-0164. Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2014-0164, a resolution providing for the submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga an amendment adding Article 6, Section 6.03 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, establishing the Investment Advisory Committee in the Charter, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Very good, thank you. Before the last item, I failed to ask if there was any public comment related to that specific agenda item. Was there any?
No.
Okay, hearing none.
Not any.
Okay, is there any relating to this item?
I don't see any. No.
Very good, thank you. This proposed charter amendment relates specifically to the Investment Advisory Committee. And once again, this is another call for more accountability and independence. The current investment advisory committees by statute, under statutory county, the other 86 counties in the state require the investment advisory committee be comprised of 2 members of the Board of County Commissioners and the treasurer, or all 3 members of the Board of County Commissioners, the treasurer, and the clerk of courts. Under our charter form of government, when the ORC has designated 2 members of the Board of County Commissioners, we have split those, one with the council and one with the executive. The challenge that comes in under our form of government is that when we have split that designation, the 3rd member being the treasurer is an employee of the executive. And hence the appearance of a lack of independence when you have an employee and his or her employer sitting side by side on a board where their composition makes up a majority of the voting block. That's the purpose for bringing this forward. There's an amendment here which after further review, although I understand it effectively contains the language that is in the original amendment, it does strip out this appearance of the board composition. And I'm just going to look at Mr. King. Is that correct? In my review, I originally agreed to the language, understanding that it was going to be part of the original ordinance, not the only component of the ordinance, or the resolution.
Sure. The proposed substitute basically clarifies that council has the authority to both set the county's investment policy and reorganize the powers and duties of the board of the Investment Advisory Committee. So it basically clarifies that council can reorganize the structure of the board, but the charter amendment in and of itself does not do that.
Okay, So this proposed amendment, which does not change the composition of the board?
Not in and of itself, no.
Okay. It only pertains to the rules of the Investment Advisory Committee being approved by council.
It basically provides that council can, by ordinance, do what the original, the charter amendment currently before this committee is proposing to do. And this was a recommendation that came from our law director, basically due to some concerns about the role of the Investment Advisory Committee under both state and local law, and basically to give them and us the flexibility to make that reorganization without requiring potential future return to the ballot if there were any issues that arose.
So could this amendment then address the composition of the board?
It could, but it would need, but changing the composition of the board would require an ordinance to be passed by council.
But it could be an ordinance, not a charter amendment?
Correct.
Okay. All right, with that said, then I'm comfortable with the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, yes, just like to follow up on the comment that was just made. You indicated that the law director is approved the language or the concept here?
He actually was the one who sent over this particular language.
Yeah, but is he endorsing the idea of having a change to the investment advisory policy and the investment advisory committee?
That was not conveyed to me. That was
okay. I want to make sure that when you said the law director approved this, I'm just wanting to make sure that he's not necessarily endorsing this. Those are two different.
I'd let the law department speak.
Hi, I'm Ruchi Asher. I'm Assistant Law Director. I can speak to what the Law Director submitted for this amendment. This amendment allows council to, if it wishes to, rearrange or reorganize the Investment Advisory Committee by ordinance, but it also allows for more time and more flexibility to contemplate what would be the best way to do so. So it's not necessarily endorsing one form of reorganization or another. If council so chooses, it could certainly keep the current organization of the Investment Advisory Committee. But the amendment, this charter amendment, which is similar to the municipal model, does allow for a reorganization of the board, if we so decide, as well as establishing the rules and procedures that govern the investment of the county's policies.
No, I understand what this does.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, what is he advocating? That we change the policy, that this board would actually be the fiscal and financial reviewer of those, one, and two, that we have the ability and the authority to change the structure of the committee itself. I understand this language allows us to do it. Are you saying that he is advocating we do both of those?
There's nothing, we're not advocating that you do one or the other of those, but if it is an issue, it should be something that is done over time and done in a more flexible manner. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the charter. So if there are issues that come up later on, it can be amended by ordinance and it doesn't have to go through the ballot again.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
I understand, of course, what the councilman is trying to get at but it's really a question of whether the administration has a position on the issue, because it's really not the law director's job to have an issue to have a side when we're having a public policy discussion. The law directors are legal counsel as well as the executives, and I think what you're proposing falls nicely in that area. The kind of advice about how we might go about doing what's proposing to be done. I'm not trying to draw the administration into this discussion because it's not necessary for them to do that unless they have a strong incentive to do that. But so I'm just trying to clarify as far as I can.
Yeah, my first step was to identify, because the comment was made that the law director said X, Y, and Z, so I wanted to find that. Second is the follow-up is where's the administration exactly? I wanted to circle the questions around, as you know how lawyers think. Get that piece off and then move on.
Right, and further to that, just for further clarity as to my intent in bringing this forward, as I laid out the statutory Investment Advisory Committee composition, being a majority or all of the Board of County Commissioners in a statutory county under this environment, to which the electorates elected those folks to be the complete financial custodians of taxpayer dollars. Under our form of government, council has one representative of three, but we are removed from the process altogether. And we're talking about $830 million under management today. And I just think it's important there be more accountability placed back on our shoulders as it would have been if we were a statutory county. And I believe, Mr. Boyle, did you want to, I saw you reach for your microphone.
You know, just very in brief, as these matters come before and as they're fine-tuned, I do think all of the members of council can anticipate the executive weighing in some form or another. The discussions obviously are at the preliminary stages, and as we move forward, I think that once things get a little more solidified and a little more concrete, that the executive will weigh in on it. With that as kind of a premise, obviously the important thing relative to investments is to make sure that there is flexibility and still the ability to move in a prompt fashion, and those will likely be the paramount issues, I think, that the executive will use, among others, in making a determination of whether or not this is a policy that should be furthered or not. But as the dialogue moves forward, I think that you'll get a little more input from the executive on this specific matter.
Okay, very good. So before us, we have, I'm sorry. Well, let me do this. Well, right now we're discussing the proposal that's before us and not the amendment, because the amendment has been voted on. So why don't, I should have asked and brought this item forward. So let me make a motion to substitute the current resolution 2014-0164 with the proposed substitute that has been presented. Is there a second? Second. Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, this is a motion which is made and seconded to substitute the current resolution. Mr. Schron?
Yeah, I do have discussion on it because I think these are two separate areas of which I am supportive of the structure, whatever it needs to be, that I have no problem with having that discussion. I do have a problem with this body setting the financial policies. Once you've created the structure, I don't think that this body should be the one to do the investment policy. I think that all we're doing is opening ourselves up to micromanaging how that investment policy, you put a board in place, they will establish how they are intending to bring forward that, and I think that it's a risky area. Once you start bringing this body, then you start talking about should they be investing in this particular bond or that particular bond, and it gets pretty scary because I think that then you start getting down into, I mean, these are the kind of conversations that you ask the investment policy board to make their good faith best decisions. I mean, just as an example, we made discussions about whether we should invest into Israeli bonds. I don't know that once we have relinquished and given somebody the authority to do that, do we want all 11 of us weighing in on this bond or that investment? And I don't think, so that's why I see, I'll be voting against the amendment because I would rather these stay as two separate components. One, the structure of the body. Two, whether or not we should be weighing in on each individual policy, investment policy decision.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Simon.
I'm still speaking, I will be speaking to the amendment as well. I agree with Councilman Schron with regard to us becoming less as an oversight, but an actor in the investment policies. And I don't think that is prudent for this body to delve into those areas. In terms of, I have to contrast it though, however, to the amendment before us, before it's amended, which really doesn't meet the standards I think we need to look at as well, because as it sits before us, it has a county prosecutor on there, and I'm not comfortable with the makeup even of that constituted body as it's written before the amendment. So I don't think either are satisfactory, and I think at this point we're really addressing a problem, trying to address a problem that doesn't really exist, and we're making murkier waters and making us more of actors instead of overseers. And I'm not comfortable with the board. So I think we really do need more time with this. Down the road, there's nothing urgent about this, and I don't believe that there's a problem that needs to be fixed other than perhaps an appearance at some point down the line. And those are my my comments, as well as the checks and balances as the charter currently situates the board, I think makes sense as it's presently constituted. But I think we need more time with this. I think either version of this isn't satisfactory, given the importance of what we're dealing with our county's investments. So I think I would recommend shelving both of these until we can really put time into this and really set forth the board, if we're going to do it, of what makes sense for investment policy.
Okay, Mr. Schron.
Just to weigh in on the structure, what we just got done doing by recommendation of the independent audit, if we could follow that same kind of model on the independent investing, I think you'd find that there would be, I believe there would be some support for that, because it does bring that same kind of component into the independence on the investing, the same way we're bringing in independence on the audit side. So the language that our council president drafted for the one, I think could very nicely work in the structure of the investment side by doing that same kind of configuration. And again, investment boards that I am aware of do use outside support to help wrestle with that same exact issue when you're dealing with this kind of money out there.
Let me, yep.
I did want to just clarify that the language in the amendment doesn't require council, or doesn't set council as the policymaking body for investment policy. It just means that the same way in general law we have a set of guidelines for what political subdivisions can invest in, and then the investment advisory committee sets the actual investment policy within those guidelines. It retains that similar structure. The investment advisory committee would remain the body that actually determines what the investment policy is, but it leaves open the possibility that and there's nothing in here that says that council would have to do this, but if council determines that maybe a different set of guidelines than what's in the revised code would be appropriate, it leaves open the possibility in the future to draft different guidelines. But we can retain with this amendment that the investment advisory committee is the investing authority and sets the policy. So that structure is still provided for.
Mr. Germana, do you have anything? Did I see you and then Mr. Miller?
Well, I was kind of nodding my head.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
I thought I heard something.
Mr. Miller, if you don't mind, I think the amendment is much better than the first part, because, you know, this is not saying that we're going to be discussing investments. It's saying that in order to reallocate some rules on what the investment advisory committee is going to do, we don't have to have a charter amendment. So to Ms. Simon's point, by enacting the amendment, we have time and nothing's going to change radically. But if this was having to do with what investments we're going to do, and we're going to have to discuss that, it's going to be, we should leave that to our financial advisors. Now, I'm not talking the investment committee. It's the advisors that are professionals that talks to the investment advisory committee. So I think this amendment is much better than the original.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chair, if I can just comment.
I'll go to Mr. Miller, and then we'll come back.
Mr. Chair and my colleagues, I'm of the same opinion, basically, for the reasons stated by the Assistant Law Director, that I agree with Councilman Schron that we should not generally be in the business of setting investment policy, but I do think that as one of only 2 county legislative authorities, we are the legislative authority, and in some sense, we should have final authority when it needs to be exercised, and this amendment kind of does that, and doesn't require us to do anything, but it better delineates what our powers are under home rule. So I think that's a good thing. So I'm for substituting. Thank you.
Ms. Simon.
Yeah, I agree that this does not explicitly give council the authority to make policy with regard to our investments. However, it gives us the home rule ability to adjust this board in any form and fashion that we choose. And I think there's a danger perhaps down the road, that's all I was cautioning against, is to future, what are we going to put on this board? Are we going to put 2 council, 3 council? It just sort of leaves it open to us and future councils to perhaps put that board in their pocket, and that's all. I understand this doesn't give us that explicit power to, or it doesn't say we're gonna do that, but it gives us the power to say that, and I'm all in favor of home rule in most instances. I just think there's a little bit of danger here, that's all.
Very good.
Mr. Chair, I just want to have some, I guess, some clarity. So this amendment, this will go into the charter, but for any changes or anything to move forward, we would have to go through ordinance, correct? Okay.
This, and Mr. King maybe can address this, but this basically provides us with a more broad overview into the Investment Advisory Committee, and would require an ordinance in order to make those amendments. Is that correct?
That is correct, and actually, I can just read the language. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's very simple, too. It basically delineates that council has the power to establish by ordinance the laws and procedures governing the deposit and investment of the county's monies, including the general classification of eligible investments, and the ability to reorganize or reallocate the powers and duties of the Investment Advisory Committee prescribed by general law. So that's, I mean, it's basically giving about as much flexibility as I think council could have under home rule power to reorganize the committee or change the procedures by which the investment policy is set.
Now, in a statutory committee, council de facto, because 2 of 3 members of council or 3 of 3 all make up a majority of that board, depending on the 3 or 5 member composition.
Correct, of the Board of County Commissioners. Yeah.
Right, of the Board of County Commissioners. So in effect, the Board of County Commissioners in the 86 other counties already have this authority. Not directly, but indirectly by the fact that they all, either majority or all, sit on their county's investment advisory committee.
That is true. They sit on it with at least the treasurer.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, there's been a motion, and I believe it's been second.
Can I, one more thing? It's true that the statutory counties will have their commissioners on there, but this is a whole different structure. And the whole purpose, I believe, to have this new form of government is to have checks and balances. And that's why I think the board, as it's constituted, speaks more to where we are as a charter government. I don't think we want to go back to a statutory allocation in this instance, since the whole drive behind the new county government is to have checks and balances. And I wouldn't want to translate this into being that all council people are sitting on this body, which this amendment would perhaps allow.
Mr. Schron.
Yeah, by analogy, we wouldn't want this body sitting up here doing the audits and how the audit individual procedures are that we just put forth an independent audit body. Why would we want to make this body, this particular change completely different than what we just went through? And to me, there's a similarity and a parallel here that you've put together a body. Do you want to have this council sitting there saying, this is a good one, this is a bad one, this is a good one? Because I can guarantee you there are hundreds and hundreds of decisions that can be made on the investments side of the aisle. And this body, once you start going down that slippery slope, you can't get off of it. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Once again, the only point here is this body by charter has the fiduciary responsibility of taxpayer dollars, and we were further removed from that as a result as to how the charter is currently written. And we're talking about $830 million as we stand today. I believe we should have a little more input. There should be a little more independence as to the utilization and how those decisions are being made. But motions are made and seconded. This would be a motion to move resolution 2004.
No.
Madam Chair.
Oh, this is moved on the amendment?
Madam Chairperson,
I'm sorry, yeah, Mr. Brady.
I'd like to request a roll call vote.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote on the amendment or on the final vote? Okay, there'll be a roll call vote on the amendment. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Ms. Conwell?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hairston? Ms. Simon?
No.
Ms. Conley?
No.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
No.
Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Schron?
No.
And Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Motion does not carry. The vote is 5-6.
Very good. So before us then is the original resolution, since the amendment failed. The original resolution is broken down into a little more finite detail. And fundamentally, I'll break it down since I was the author of this proposal, would be to change the composition of the Investment Advisory Committee to be the treasurer as the chief investment officer of the county. A member of council is appointed by the council president. In here, the prosecuting attorney, I understand there's some consternation with the prosecuting attorney. I'd be willing to accept an amendment on that. Further changes, it gives council, there's some discussions regarding how vacancies are filled. Powers and duties, the Investment Advisory Committee are further outlined, as are investment policies and rules and procedures shall require council approval. That's the original amendment, resolution. Is there any discussion on the resolution before us?
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Ms. Simon?
Is this, I'm just going to reiterate my comment that I think this is attempting to fix a problem that doesn't exist, that I think the present constitution is satisfactory as it is now, but I think this requires more time for us to determine what the structure will be. As it's currently written, there's nothing personal against the prosecutor. I just don't think that's the appropriate party to making decisions about the county's investment, one of 3 people on the board. So at this point, I would be voting no for this, to give us more time to study this and to see what kind of board would make sense, if not, to see how this board continues to operate.
Okay, very good. And as the author of this, I'll just interject. The reason that I initially put in here the county prosecutor was to ensure that there was elected representation. Although the treasurer would be a delegate of the executive, there is accountability directly back to the elected official, and that's why the prosecutor being the only other charter elected official reference other than the executive members of council, and the prosecutor had that accountability back to the electorate. That's the purpose of the prosecutor. Mr. Schron.
Yes, I would, because the prosecuting attorney is not somebody that I'm comfortable with being on there, but I am very comfortable with the concept as suggested by the council president, that if you replace the word prosecutor with 3 residents of the county appointed by the county executive and confirmed by council for a period ending 1 and 2 years, be replaced. Again, lifting that language directly from what we just said on the audit committee, I think it would give us the flexibility to which you're talking about, and actually bring expertise that we don't currently have on this investment advisory board. We could be bringing in experts in the fundamental financial, just the same way we talked about the audit. So I am moving that we amend, taking the word prosecuting attorney out and substituting the words a member, 3 members, 3 residents of the county appointed by the county executive and confirmed by council for terms not to ending in 1 and 2 years.
Okay, very good. And I'll second that. That language, Madam Clerk, is in 0165 on page 47, first paragraph of the package. Motion's been made and seconded to substitute prosecutor with the language as written. Discussion on that motion?
Chair. Oh, Ms. Conwell.
So we're talking about, we're amending this right now.
This would be,
Just,
this would be amending the original resolution to remove the word, to remove the prosecuting attorney and substitute with three members of the public, appointed by the executive, confirmed by council.
I think President Connolly has a statement.
You know, this is really major issues here, and I don't think we should be rushed into this. I mean, how we do our investment advisory committee, and this is major. This is the heart of it all. So I just think maybe we ought to take a little time, and we have some other ones that maybe we could deal with quicker, and maybe table this till everybody can kind of consider it and look it over.
I second.
Yeah, I moved the table.
Well, I second. Well, Mr. Chair, if I may.
I'm not saying anybody's wrong. It's just I don't want to get rushed into anything, and it's just too important.
I agree with the president. In fact, I would actually not even say table. I think we just need to have more time than rushing this on the ballot, because as that amendment states, we don't even have qualifications for our the people who are going to be on this board to put and leave that open. I'm very uncomfortable with that. If we're going to craft something, we need time to determine who would be best qualified for that if we're going to make a charter amendment.
And you know, there's some vacancies open on a number of boards, and this administration has not always been the most prompt in filling vacancies. And we certainly wouldn't want to have these seats open. So I think that hopefully in working with the new administration in the next 4 years that we do a little bit better in making sure that all appointments are timely filled, but we certainly only create some more that are open. So, and this is just too important.
Mr. Schron, the reason
Well, the-
continue is because there's been a motion on the table but no second, so we're continuing the discussion.
We did acknowledge that the audit is that this is an important position, but the audit is auditing $1.3 billion, and we just used that language.
I know.
To drop that same language in, which we've already debated for the investment advisory, is not even 1/10 of the dollars amount. So we just approved that exact language to audit our financials, which our financials go as high as $1.3 billion. It seems to me that language ought to be sufficient for our investment policy of less than 1/10. No,
I'm sorry, let me back up. Was there a second on the motion on the table? All right, I'm sorry. Well,
I thought you would.
Mr. Schron made the motion, Mr. Greenspan made the
no,
second.
we're talking on the motion on the table.
No, I said I wanted to actually table it all together off.
You have a second motion?
So that would be a no.
If this limits discussion, I'll withdraw my motion.
I believe if you have a motion and a second on the floor, that you have to deal with that motion first before you can motion to table it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So is are we ruling my motion to table out of order?
I would
Yes.
never do that to you, Madam President.
No, that's okay. I mean, I don't want to call it discussion. I was really just making my point that I think it's just too big of an issue.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, so there's a motion on there's a motion to amend, and that's the motion that's before this body at this time. So if there's no further discussion on the motion to amend, this was to replace the prosecutor and replace with 3 members of the public.
Question, Mr. Chair, will we have an opportunity again to review this? Or if we vote now on this amendment, is this the one that's going to go to council for adoption?
If this amendment, yes, and it's yes. However, we still have it'll be read on the 22nd, the second reading. There's still the third reading, the first meeting in August. However, we can always bring it back up and discuss. We have until September 5th to get it to the Board of Elections. So we can still move this along.
We can still amend or vote no.
On the floor.
Or vote no.
Correct, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so there's a motion before us to amend removing prosecutor, replace it with fundamentally 3 members of the public. I say fundamentally because the language is going to be different. All in favor of amending signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Let's do a roll call
I'm
vote.
requesting a roll call vote, please.
Roll call, please.
You can't regret it.
I can.
Roll call vote, please.
Conwell, Ms. Conwell?
Okay, what is the roll call?
The roll call vote is to amend the original resolution. It had a first by Mr. Schron and a second by Mr. Greenspan, and this was to take the prosecutor out and add the 3 residents of the county.
No.
Mr. Jones?
No.
Mr. Hairston?
No.
Ms. Simon?
No.
Ms. Conley?
No.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Brady?
No.
Mr. Germana?
No.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Mr. Greenspan? Motion fails.
Okay, very good. So before us now is the resolution that was before us in its presented form. If there's any, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to move Resolution 2014-0164 to the full council on the September 22nd meeting for second reading. Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll do a voice vote on this item. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
No. No.
So this item fails.
Mr. Chairman,
And Madam.
roll call.
Call.
Roll call vote?
Roll call.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote on this. Pause made for roll call vote. Roll call vote, Madam Clerk, to move.
Have some clarity, Mr. Chair. I mean, we agreed not to do the amendment for the prosecuting thing, but I do have to agree with Council President Connolly. I thought we were going to move this forward to have further discussion, because, no? Just table it totally, okay. Now,
It's not being tabled. It would either be
that's what I want to be clear.
Stay in committee.
to stay,
Just stay in committee, okay.
No, if we-
The motion was to send it to the full council for consideration for second reading.
correct. If that fails, then it does not move forward. It will by nature then be in committee.
But it would never die here.
Be on Tuesday's council agenda for second reading, if council approves this.
However, if it fails, it just stays in committee until withdrawn.
That's correct.
Right, okay. So it would, if a no vote would keep it in committee until such time as I withdraw it as the sponsor.
Yvonne? So if we vote no,
I got it,
hold it in committee.
I got it,
Never came up.
I got it.
Okay, we'll go ahead, do we need to roll call vote? Call's made for roll call vote. Roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Okay, the motion is to move this to the full council for the July 22nd agenda for second reading. Roll call vote, that would be Ms. Conwell? Mr. Jones? Mr. Hairston? Ms. Simon?
No.
Ms. Conley?
No.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Brady?
No.
Mr. Germana?
No.
Mr. Gallagher?
No.
Mr. Schron?
No.
And Mr. Greenspan.
It's my own resolution, yes.
The motion does not carry.
Accused of wasting time, but that would be a complete waste of time if I voted no. Okay, Madam Clerk, the next item on the agenda is Resolution 2014-0160. Page 11 in our package.
Resolution number 2014-0160, resolution providing for the submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga an amendment to Article 2, Section 2.01, and Article 3, Section 3.03 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, modifying the residency requirements for the offices of County Executive and County Council, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bruce Akers and Ms. Nancy Dietrich may want to address this item at this time.
Very good. Mr. Akers, Mayor, I'm sorry for my lack of respect there, Mayor Akers.
Mr. Chairman.
90 seconds, please.
We urge the members of council to support this. We felt along originally that there was a missing in the original charter that the county executive, there should be a requirement there as much as it has for council. So we felt it brought that to get some consistency there. Also, we felt there'd be a clarification about if a sitting member of council, by virtue of redistricting, that question got to be resolved, that we should make sure that that councilperson is able to finish his or her term. And so that we support this and the clarification on that and urge your support. As to, well, I'll leave it at that.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Oh, okay. Nothing on 0160. All right, very good. Thank you. This is an item that the primary author is Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman, my colleagues, I urge support of this resolution for the reasons put forward by Mayor Akers. Thank you.
Mr. Miller, is there a post substitute that you have?
There's a substitute that I believe Councilmember Schron is going to offer.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Schron.
Thank you. Yes, I have attached a substitute to this, and that is, instead of having both these periods go for 2 years, it would go for 1 year. And the 1 year, if everybody looks at how this actually is measured, it's measured from at the time of filing. So in next year's election, it will be almost, it'll be 2 years that the waiting period would actually calculate from the time of filing, at least my understanding on a presidential election year. And so actually I did discuss this with from the way the time of filing is of the next, in the 2016 period of time. So I think that certainly 1 year plus the date of filing is sufficient amount of time. This almost comes out to, like I said, it comes out in a presidential year to being 2 years out there from the length of time.
Mr. Schron, could you give an actual chronology if you could?
Yeah,
as to how?
I think, actually, Mike, you can talk to specifics on this, but I believe that with the early primaries, go ahead.
Sure. So a member running in the 2016 election would need to file for the March primary 90 days before the primary, and that would, I believe, would fall in December of 2015. So if you needed to be a resident of the county for a year prior to that, you would need to be a resident from December of 2014, which is about 2 years before you would assume office. So that I believe was the point.
It's more than 2 years from the time you would actually be taking over office, which if you look at that, I think that's more than sufficient in time to find out whether a resident is committed to the county. 2 years is certainly more than enough time. And by the language, unfortunately, this comes out to 3 years the way we currently have it proposed.
Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm opposed to this oral motion because I think we want to be firm that 2 years is 2 years, and it's not, we really wanted 2 years, but we're going to say 1 year just because of how the election calendar is situated. So I'm comfortable, and there's no reason to change this 2-year term. I think we need to be firm about what it is instead of just using creative math and what the result is that we are desiring.
Let me try to just interject and see, and with Mr. Schron's philosophy, the way it's currently written, it effectively would be 3 years then, is that correct, the way it's written today?
It is. And it's not creative math, it's actual math that comes up every 2 years, every general election where we have a president of the United States. So I believe that what was miscalculated when it was written, just like we left out a number of things in the charter, I believe that the intent was probably that somebody would be there 2 years before taking office.
So, Mr. Chair, then, do we want an amendment to say 3 years then, if that's the desire, to have it a 3-year period?
And this, my language is exactly using the exact same language. Right this moment, we are proposing to amend language that includes the county executive. There's no mention of the county executive in the charter. All I'm doing is trying to, 1, make it consistent, and 2, make it within what I believe was probably the structural intent, which was to make it 2 years before they would take office, that you'd be familiar with the county. This is not creative math. It is math that will come up every year, Ms. Simon, every general election where you have a president being elected, which I think will come up every 4 years, as the last time I checked.
And let me, Mr. Akers, when I'm calling you Mayor, I'm sorry again, Mayor Akers, just from an historical perspective as one who helped craft the charter, and is that the original intent as Mr. Schron is discussing, or is it as Ms. Simon is?
No, I stood back up. I knew I had a few more seconds out of my 90 seconds. And that we as a council commission met last week, and we are comfortable with the 1 year or with this amendment, realizing that in fact it comes out to be 2 years. But we're comfortable with the Schron amendment.
Okay, all right, thank you. So you were just adding on to the remaining time of your 90 seconds. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I believe this also includes, in the body, it says in county council, so it would not only change the county exec, but also county council's requirements. At least that's what's in the type, in the.
Mr. Schron?
Yes, it's to merely make them consistent, because right now, there is no language for the county executive. So I'm suggesting that 1 year from date of filing, which, again, is 2 years in the year of a presidential election, would be consistent for council and for the county executive. So you would be using the same exact 1 year period of time prior to filing.
But not all council run at the same time, doesn't that?
Staggered. Council staggered. So this is, again, creating problems and confusion, and why, Mr. Chair, thank you for letting me speak. I mean, this is just confusing the issue. If we want 2 years, say 2 years. For both. I mean, because we're staggered on council. We're not all up at the same time, and that's gonna jeopardize the term, and it will be inconsistent. That's why it's important to have a set period of time.
Yeah, and I would have no problem with drafting language. It would say 2 years you would be 2 years in the county prior to taking office. And that would coincide with what you're talking about, Ms. Simon. If you said you cannot take office until 2 years prior to, just exactly like if you're a U.S. Senator, you must be 35 to take office, and the President, you must be 35 on that date. Fix the date and certain and say 2 years. I would have no problem whatsoever.
Okay, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, my primary idea is that the requirement for the executive and the council should be the same. I do think that 2 years from date of filing, which means 3 years by the time you take office, is a little long. And so for that reason, I do prefer for Councilman Schron's amendment to be included, but I could live with it either way. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
If I may.
Mr. Boyle, you're limited to 15 seconds.
15.
And when that bell rings.
The laughter is eating most of my time. Again, on behalf of the executive, Executive Fitzgerald did speak about this during the charter review process, and it did come to our attention. And quite frankly, I think a lot of us were surprised that there was no time frame for executive residency, and obviously supports this in terms of the time frame. I think having it consistent with the time that the county council has makes sense. The only caveat, without getting too deep in the weeds here, those of us who've been involved in electoral politics have worked in primary campaigns where we've walked through 3 feet of snow because the primary was in March, or then the primary may be in May. And so those things have fluctuations in it that perhaps would be solved if you had a date certain of residency, 2 years from the date you're sworn in or whatever. I just offer that not with a expectation. I mean, more than anything, I just wanted to point that out, that if you're tying it into the filing, that situation may change based on when the state determines to hold the primary elections.
Mr. Schron?
And I would be 100% satisfied with coinciding with Ms. Simon's 2 years. If it's 2 years from date of being sworn in, now you got your 2 years. Now it's fixed. It's a date certain that everybody can be comfortable with, rather than extending it 1 year, 3 years, and 1 year, 2.5. And this would actually fix a date some certain that says 2 years from the date you're being sworn in. That coincides with what we do in the Constitution for other offices based on age, and why not fix a date certain? And that would give the 2 years to be coinciding with what Ms. Simon's waiting period that she's suggesting, and that would be certainly a fixed date that doesn't move around the calendar from that standpoint.
So just to try to mediate and understand where we are right now. So we have an amendment or a proposed substitute, which we have not had a motion second on, although we've been discussing it, which is fine. The original proposal has 2 years for both the executive and council, but it's based on the filing declaration, not on the, as has recently been discussed, not on the some certain date being the date of taking office. So neither one of these proposals currently has any consistent language with the discussion. So what we'll do then, because we do have an amendment before us, a substitute, is we'll go ahead and entertain a motion to adopt the substitute as the moving resolution. If that fails, we'll fall back to the original resolution and entertain any amendments at that time. All right, is there a motion to adopt the substitute resolution as the guiding resolution.
So move.
Second.
Motion seconded. We've had discussion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, we'll call roll call vote on the substitute.
Calling the roll, Ms. Conwell?
No.
Mr. Jones? No. Mr. Hairston?
No.
Ms. Simon?
No.
Ms. Conley? No. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
No.
Mr. Germana?
No.
Mr. Gallagher?
No.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
And Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. So before us is the original resolution. Mr. Miller, as the sponsor of this, would you like to discuss this any further?
Yes, I'll just say that this is a good amendment. We should get these terms aligned, and I would ask for the council's vote to move this forward, but I think between now and the next meeting, we should give some consideration about whether we want to amend it so that the date is based on the date you take office rather than the filing date. But I don't think we should try to do that on the fly.
Very good. Any further discussion? Mr. Germana, then Mr. Schron.
Mr. Chair, I'm in favor of this, whether it would have been 1 year or 2 years. But, you know, having experience and some longevity into the county, someone moves from a rural county, comes up to Cuyahoga County, you know, to understand all the neighborhoods, we're one of the most complex counties. So the extra year of experience, you know, I think, but I'm in favor of this either way. The other thing that I'm in favor of, and the reason I co-sponsored this with Councilman Miller, is because of the redistricting. I like this idea that the people elected a county council person, and then if there has to be some redistricting, you know, that person is still going to be, you know, the elected representative. So.
Okay, Mr. Schron.
Yeah, and I support this for the same reason Mr. Germana does, as far as consistency between the two, having consistency between the two offices and the redistricting, but I will be suggesting that we fix a sum certain rather than having something that floats around the calendar. I can live with the 2 years as long as we fix a date that everybody knows that that's the date. Everything starts and stops on January 1st. I think it would be a reasonable place to amend this thing to include the 2 years. Thanks.
So just for clarity, Mr. Schron, so is it your intent to bring forward an amendment subsequent to today's vote at the next council meeting?
Mr. Miller, this is not the time or the place. Let's fix it. We'll come back and adjust that, and we'll see whether or not, I think we can come up with language that agrees with everybody's intent on this thing. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. I'll make a motion. Well, would somebody else like to make a motion?
As the sponsor, I'll move that we refer Resolution 2014-0160 to the full council for second reading.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Calling the roll, Ms. Conwell? Yes. Mr. Jones?
Clarity. A yes vote means
It will move forward to the next council agenda for second reading.
yes.
Mr. Hairston? Ms. Simon? Yes. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Brady? Yes. Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Very good, thank you. The next item on the agenda will be Resolution 2014-0162. This, if the clerk will please read this item, 0162 in our package starts on page 26.
Resolution number 2014-0162, a resolution providing for the submission to the electors of the County of Cuyahoga an amendment to Article 12, Section 12.09 of the Charter of Cuyahoga County, accelerating the timeline for the appointment process and commencement of the term of the Charter Review Commission for the year in which the appointment is made, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Very good, thank you. We have no amendments or substitutes on this. Has anyone signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Miller.
Mr. Chairman and my colleagues, this amendment originated from the Charter Review Commission. It's in exactly the form that they recommended, with one exception, that we incorporated Council President Conley's proposal to provide one additional month, so that if, when we receive the appointments for the Charter Review Commission, there's problems immediately apparent, there would be time for the executive to review them and resubmit, and still have 60 days for a good council review of the appointments to the Charter Review Commission. This amendment essentially serves by facilitating a good process for council review of the proposed appointments to the Charter Review Commission, and I ask for your support to place this item on the ballot.
Very good, thank you. Any discussion?
I'll second if that was the motion.
I'll make that a motion.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. You have 2 seconds. Motion's made and seconded by Mr. Germana. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Schron, if you will take a roll call vote. No. Okay, we'll do a voice vote. All in favor of Resolution 2014-0162, moving forward to the 22nd meeting for second reading, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That item advances. Let me ask this. We're at the halfway point right now as far as agenda items, and I noticed a couple members. Let's take a 5-minute recess. We'll come back. We'll make it 8 minutes. We'll come back at 10 minutes till 3.